If you cannot hear me, say so, because this time they've adjusted everything. Can you hear me? Should I speak louder? Oh, good.
Did you push the blue button?
Yes, she's on.
This is amateur hour, and I'm the biggest amateur of all. I do not understand any of this, and I have...
Elena Taylor says you are loud and clear.
Oh,
and
I'm
Tammy
so
Smith is
grateful.
watching.
Thank you, then I don't need to shout. Okay. Guys, last time I wanted to honor all the amateurs, including me, because Jesse wasn't able to be there. I should speak louder. Okay.
You're good. You're good.
Jesse wasn't able to be there, and we were all amateurs. But this time, Jesse is outside because he's working, so he can't be in the house with me, because we couldn't do it outside because they're predicting more rain. So, to explanation, Greg and Ken are outside giving instructions to Joni, who has never done this before, but is the only one not working from away from home, so she can be with me. And she's manipulating it all. Okay. I want to talk about the second painting that I did. But before I do that, I would like to go back to what I'm doing about special needs people and the drawings and why I'm doing them. And let's see, about 40 years ago, right? Remember, I'm 91, practically, and 40 years ago was a very short time ago. We saw an ad in the paper for somebody who needed volunteers to help a little boy to walk. And I called and I said, my kids are off for summer. Can I bring them? Could they help? And we were told, yes, bring them. And I did. And I wonder how much of their life's success comes from that. And I would just like to tell everybody, please, if you have young children, let them become volunteers, because it changes the way they see the world. At any rate, what I noticed at that time, they just needed 4 people, 1 on each arm and 1 on each leg, to manipulate the little boy in such a way as if to stimulate his brain to know how to move his arms and legs so that he could walk. And to do that, he had to creep and crawl constantly, time after time after time. And when I was working with him, a garbage truck went by, and he looked at me and wanted to stand up, and I said, no, you can't. Keep walking, keep crawling. And I made him keep on doing it until I realized something is wrong. And I said, no, you could look. And he ran to look, and I held him, and we both cried because the truck was gone. And after that, he would never work with me again, because he realized that I realized I was wrong. So my kids, Joni and Ken, who are right now part of the manipulation of my speaking to you, they came with the dog. And the dog would be on one side with one of the kids, and then the dog would move to the other kid, and little Craig was allowed to kiss the dog when he got there. There was no way of not making him crawl. He was so happy. There was so much laughter, and he got to kiss the dog constantly. That was one thing I learned. In those days, for children who were not special needs, there was Dr. Spock. Whenever something happened that I needed help with, at the moment, I would run to Dr. Spock. But there was no book, there was no help for the family of a special needs child. And Harvey had asked me to illustrate the book for him for children with special needs. And I would like very much advice from all of you. What you couldn't learn if you didn't have a Dr. Spock. Because the little boy had to move his tongue and his jaw, and he couldn't. So his parents finally came up with their own solution, peanut butter. And it worked. And so if any of you who had or have taken care of a special needs person, send us advice, because we don't have a Dr. Spock now. Okay, let me show you the drawings that I'm doing. This is the last one that I did. I noticed that people who have special needs very often help others. And so this one is, the little boy is saying, I'm scared, don't leave me. And the other person of special needs says, don't be afraid, I'll always be there for you. Are you able to show the picture?
I'm trying. Hold on.
Guys, remember, we're special needs when it comes to this.
There we go.
Because Jesse, who knows how to do this, can't be with us because he's working now. So he can't come into my house.
They can see the picture now, Mom.
They can see the picture. Good. Let me show you this other one. So far, I have 4 drawings. I'll show you number 2. I wanted to show joy.
Lift it a little bit higher, a little bit lower.
And I know...
Lower it a little bit.
Lower it.
A little
I know
more.
That Harvey's
Good.
boy Ricky loves music. And when I was in the institute, in the residence there, I watched him listening to music. And music is a miracle. Okay? This was the most important part of my speech. But I also promised that I would speak about my paintings. The second painting that I did, oh, and I want you to remember this. This painting means get to know people. Stop putting yourself into a corner of being different. I painted every person of a different background, and I painted them in such a way that they do not speak to each other. Like the rest of us, we don't acknowledge that others exist. And I'm asking you, begin. Because nature made us so that everything translates into a connection with something else. I walked down the Grand Canyon with my daughter many, many years ago. And what I realized was that nothing dies. Everything continually supports something else. When a tree dies, it gives food for the ground. And none of us will disappear, but what we leave behind us remains. And now I want to tell you about the second painting that I did. It was for a doctor who came from Italy. He used to come whenever he came to America, because he traveled a lot. He would go into Orchard Street because he said it reminds him of Europe. Because Europe, am I loud enough? Wonderful. Because in Europe, there are outdoor markets where people can bargain and see things, and that he made it his business always to stop on Orchard Street. But my problem was when he approached me, having known that I've already done one, because he had seen the first one, he said, just do a lot of signs. Do a street for me the way this is. And I thought that there was an empty store where somebody was on vacation that I could sit in front there. So I did. And right away, a neighbor came over and he said, no, when he's on vacation, I'm allowed to be here. Move, lady. So I moved, and I moved to another place. And somebody stopped me and said, no, this is my spot when this guy's on to pay rent or go. And I thought, this is it. It hurt so much to be refused. But then next to it, there was a store by an Irving Adler. And I said to him, could I stay in front of your store? And he said, sure. And because of him, the world opened up. And I began to paint. And that was my second painting. Are there any questions?
This is a chance for people to ask questions if they've got them.
Remember, it takes a lot of courage to continue when people say no. But if not for Irving Adler, I could not have painted the second painting. No questions?
Greg has a question. Greg Romer does. I have one. You discovered what you love to do. How can we find what we most want to do?
Have courage and talk to yourself and say, what do you really want to do? Because, as I said in the first session, that my daughter had said to me, Mom, what do you really want to do? And I said, I want to stand or sit on a street and do this. And she said, why don't you? And I said, women born in Europe who are middle-aged, because I was middle-aged at that time. Now I'm old. I said, we don't sit on street corners, at least not for the purpose of painting. And my husband said, what are they going to do, arrest you? Do it. And I did.
So Jen Cruz asks, how old were you when you first started painting?
Okay, when I first started painting, in general,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't dare use oil because oil turns to mud if you don't know what you're doing. So I think I really started painting maybe a year or two ahead of that. And what I did, I went to the public library those days, and I got all the information I wanted on a street in Africa, and I began that. But it was no joy. So instead I started to draw the people who were looking at books. I need to see the real thing because wonderful things happen. But Jen, I'm glad you asked because once I began, I had to keep going.
So Tammy asked, how many times did you hear no before you got to a yes on Orchard Street?
Constantly at the beginning. But then I learned, don't sit in front of somebody's window because you're hurting their business. But by the third painting, I was free. People found out that I was willing to do their families in the painting. And let me just go back to one thing, the Irving Adler. They even set up a cot for me for when it was so hot. And they would come out and bring me food and say, or something cold to drink and say, you must be hot. You could lie down for a little while, and we have a cot set up for you. So I found that Orchard Street became a home, the friendliest place.
So Donna, your snow shoveler helper,
Yes, yes.
said, how do you protect your positive outlook in a world full of negativity?
I meet people like you. This was here in my home, and it was winter, and my grandchild had come and had shoveled for me, but the thawing began to drop in little pieces of ice on my steps, and I went with a broom in my house coat and started to sweep, and suddenly somebody shouted from across the street, "Stop, stop, I'm coming right over." And this wonderful Donna, who just asked me this question, came over and shoveled. And she said, "I wouldn't let my grandmother shovel." And when I did my first painting of Long Beach, I called her and I said, "Donna, I have to put you in there because you're the reason of why I have so much joy in my life." Okay, you might as well be introduced to the people who ask me questions.
So Donan said, did you ever do plein air painting?
Who did?
Did you ever do plein air painting?
In other words, does that mean working outside?
I think so.
Yes, I did. And I'm very unhappy because I'm not allowed out now. I could, but I can't take all the stuff with me.
Greg Romer asked, can you tell about Frau Lehrein Frogel?
I would love to. I would love to.
But say her name right, because I don't think I did.
Frau Lehrein Vogel. Frau means lady, Lehrerin means teacher, Vogel means bird. But when I was a little girl, I was tremendously shy. I wouldn't talk to anybody. And my first, second, and third grade teacher was this woman. And she taught us the joy of drawing. What she did was, I can remember exactly, we would get a copybook and we would go in about an inch or so with a pin and put a hole there, and then take a ruler and with our favorite pencil draw an outline from hole to hole, and it became a frame. And our homework was put in there. The first line, let's say, is 1 and 1 equals 2. And we did that. And having a framed thing for homework changed the quality. And when it came to line 2, we were allowed to do anything we wanted to in it, as long as we finished line 1 correctly. So she managed discipline and happiness at the same time. And we could draw. We got out all the colored pencils, and we had a whole line in which to create a design. When I was in America, I called the Red Cross, and I said, I would like to teach children to draw, but they have to be poor children who have nothing else. And this wonderful woman, Mrs. Esterbrook, said, we don't teach children, but for the first time ever, there's an opening in the Nassau County Jail for women. Mrs. Liff started that opening. I think she was the wife of a judge, so she was able to do this. And I began to teach the way Frau Lehrerin Vogel had taught me joy. And what I did, because I knew they would never have money when they got out, so it was pencil and paper, which was free. And I picked up little twigs on the street. If possible, a stick with a branch coming out. And I explained, take your finger and draw that shape. Not all of it, just one line of that curve right next to it. And they did. And then I added another curve. And there was so much joy. At that time, everybody in prison was a minority. This goes back, I guess, 40 years. And what I learned from them was something that stays with me forever. There was a woman there who was huge and scary looking. And I worked there for about 5 years. And she was in all the time because if somebody made any remark to her which she didn't like, she'd throw them. And she began to draw. She was in my class. And I had her very often because she was violent with some people. And she asked me, "Can I show you my drawing?" And I said, "Yes." And she showed me a tree which was so delicate and so beautiful. You know, Japanese art, which is minimal, but so graceful. She did a tree that was as graceful as Japanese art. And I looked at her and I thought they gave her the wrong body, because this is who she really is. And I think whatever I've done in my life was a lesson in how to grow.
A question from Benji. I miss talking to you all at camp. How do you keep busy during this time?
Oh my goodness. I miss you. I think that camp is closed, am I right? At least I'm not allowed to go among people because I'm the dangerous age. At my age, people have to keep away from me. But maybe this virus will disappear. Benji, you know, I'm afraid that the virus was something nature did to make us wake up. Because suddenly we need each other. And we were so cruel to each other. As you can see in this painting, not one person is helping somebody else. They're all on this planet, which is a subway, and they don't speak to each other. Benji, I wish you a wonderful day.
Can you tell what happened when you brought your mother to jail?
Well, my father had passed away, and my mother waited for me to come at the end of my day, Tuesdays when I went there. And she would just listen to anything I could tell her. And I looked at her and I said, "Mom, do you want to go with me?" And she looked at me and her eyes were like a little child's waiting for candy. And I said, "I'll find out." And she came with me. But she was able to do what nobody else could. Because the women, most of whom had horrible relations with their mothers. And she came to them and they came to her. And she would hug them. And one girl wrote her a letter and said, "When I couldn't get through other people, I built up building blocks that kept me from everybody. Those building blocks were called heroin. And I used it because it kept people away. But now, slowly, you're teaching me to move those blocks. And I thank you. Guys, there isn't anything that you can't do if you recognize a person. Begin to recognize.
So,
Oh, one day I remember, because I told my mother, I always try to take something real for them to draw. So she said, we'll take some grass. Let's pick some grass. And we walked into the prison, and the guard said, are you carrying anything you shouldn't? And my mother said, only grass. Not knowing that was a term for marijuana. So we had to leave that grass.
Donna asked, do you have a favorite student who came to see you years later?
No. 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 I can't play favorites. Each one is separate and mine.
Do you ever have students who come back years later?
Constantly.
Tell us about one.
Oh. One of them, her mother brought me years ago to be drawing, to teach her drawing. And one day I saw her on the boardwalk. And I said, you know what? And we hugged, and it was wonderful. She introduced me to her husband. But for many years, her husband is an incredible photographer. And for many years, we had a correspondence where she just sent me Christmas cards of her children, where her husband had photographed her children. So I knew them. And it hit me. I said, you know, I'm going to be doing a painting of Long Beach, of the boardwalk. I need to put a family into it. And I know your children so well because of the photographs. Why don't I put the two of you and your children in? So I did. And they're in the second Long Beach painting that I did. And when I was nearly finished, Eric, who used to love to do prints and loved the whole process of making prints of my paintings and selling them, but without him it wasn't any fun. So I didn't want to do that anymore when he passed away. And in the middle of doing this painting, I said to Steve, who is her husband, and I said, Steve, you're a brilliant photographer. If I ask you to do limited edition prints of the Long Beach painting, but I have nothing to do with it, I'll give you a mailing list. Don't want to do bills. I'm unemployed right now. I don't want to earn because there's too much work with that. Would you be willing to do it under your name? And they did.
So you've got 2 minutes left.
Okay. Then I just want to say, I love you, and it means so much to me to ask you to change the world. We have to change, because otherwise nature will consider us a bad investment and send us more viruses. Thank you. I love you all.
Do you have any last words?
Just help me change the world. Start kindness. Oh, a friend of mine who works in a school, they had, after the killing of Floyd, they did a program on relationships. And the answer from the students was, just be nice to everybody.
So Tammy says, we will change the world. See you next Monday.
Thank you, Tammy, and you are doing it. I love you all. Bye-bye.